Aarohi Mehta, an ambitious 18-year-old student from India, thought she had finally found her dream life in the United States. Raghav Sterling, a charming businessman with a hidden past, appeared to be her guide, her mentor, and someone she could trust. But behind his smile and generosity, a dangerous plan was quietly unfolding. Every secret meeting, every friendly gesture, and every promise was drawing Aarohi closer to a trap she couldn't see. What started as mentorship slowly turned into manipulation, isolation, and danger. One wrong step, one misplaced trust, and her entire world could collapse. Aarohi Mehta was only 18 when she stepped off the plane at Los Angeles International Airport, her heart pounding with excitement and nerves. The air felt different, heavy with opportunity and unknown possibilities. She clutched her backpack tightly, carrying not only clothes and books, but also the weight of her family's dreams. Coming from a middle-class family in Mumbai, India, Aarohi knew this was her chance to rewrite her future. She had earned a scholarship to a small private college in California, and although it was far from the glamorous universities featured in films, it represented hope, freedom, and the promise of success. From the very first day, life in the United States felt like a dream, and sometimes a challenge. The streets were wide, lined with palm trees swaying in the breeze, and cars gleamed under the California sun. Everywhere she looked, there were signs of wealth and ambition. She tried to soak it all in, capturing pictures of herself in front of her new campus and posting them online. But deep down, a gnawing loneliness followed her. Her roommates were polite but distant, busy with their own social circles. Aarohi often returned from classes to her small apartment, its walls echoing the silence she could not escape. Her parents called every evening. They wanted to know if she was eating properly, if her studies were going well, if she had made friends. Aarohi reassured them with smiles and optimism, careful not to let them see the exhaustion and isolation she felt. She kept reminding herself that she had a plan: focus on studies, work hard, and one day, her sacrifices would pay off. It was during one of her late shifts at a local cafe that she noticed him. He looked different from the usual crowd of students and tourists. His clothes were tailored, his shoes polished, and his movements carried a quiet confidence that immediately drew attention. Aarohi noticed how he always ordered the same coffee, sat at the same corner table, and worked quietly on a laptop that seemed older than his demeanor. There was something about him that was intriguing yet intimidating. His name, as he eventually told her, was Raghav Sterling. He introduced himself as a businessman, someone who invested in startups and advised young entrepreneurs. He was charming but calculated, always polite, always observant. Aarohi, cautious at first, found herself drawn to his attention. He complimented her on her drive, her intelligence, and her ambition. He asked questions that made her feel seen, as though her dreams mattered. Over time, their meetings became more frequent. He would appear during her shifts, sometimes leaving small gifts or paying for her meals, claiming it was an investment in her future. He told stories about his business ventures, showing her pictures of luxury cars, exotic vacations, and successful deals. Aarohi could not help but be impressed. In her mind, he was living proof of what she could achieve someday, someone who could guide her through the challenges she faced as an immigrant student. Slowly, Raghav's presence began to fill gaps in her life she hadn't even noticed. When she was lonely, he was there with encouragement. When she was unsure, he offered advice. He asked her to keep their interactions private, framing it as a professional mentorship that needed discretion. Aarohi agreed without suspicion, believing that secrecy was part of success. What she did not realize was that Raghav was not just a mentor or friend. He had a carefully constructed persona, one designed to manipulate vulnerable students like Aarohi. His charm was a mask, hiding years of calculated moves, hidden agendas, and dark secrets. Each conversation, each gesture, and each compliment was a piece of a larger plan. Aarohi felt special, chosen, and protected, unaware that every step she took in his world pulled her closer into a trap she could not see. The loneliness that had followed her from India made her trust him easily, and the excitement of living in a foreign land made her blind to danger. As days turned into weeks, her life became a rhythm of classes, late-night shifts, and secret meetings with Raghav Sterling. She did not tell anyone about him, not her roommates, not her classmates, and certainly not her parents. The bond they formed seemed natural, But underneath it, an invisible thread of control was tightening around her. Aarohi's story had begun like so many others, a young girl chasing dreams in a new land. But this time, the dreams were laced with danger, and the person who seemed to help her the most was slowly becoming the one who would change her life forever. The perfect, exciting new life she had envisioned was only the surface. Beneath it, shadows were moving, and the first steps into a deadly web had already begun. Over the next few months, Aarohi Mehta's life changed in ways she could never have anticipated. Her routines shifted, her priorities altered, and her once bright world began to revolve around one man, Raghav Sterling. What had started as casual attention had turned into a secret affair, though Aarohi still convinced herself it was harmless. She felt special, chosen, and wanted. Every time she saw him, every message she received, it fueled a sense of importance she had never felt before. She was 18, in a foreign country, and finally believed she had someone looking out for her. Raghav, in contrast, was calculating every move with precision. He knew how to read people, how to exploit weaknesses, and how to keep his targets close. Aarohi, innocent and trusting, was unaware of how carefully she had been selected. Her loneliness, her vulnerability as an immigrant, and her eagerness to succeed made her the perfect candidate. He made her feel that no one else understood her, that he was the only person who could truly guide her. And she believed it completely. Gradually, Raghav convinced Aarohi to make choices she never would have considered on her own. He suggested she open new bank accounts, claiming they were necessary for her future business plans. He asked her to share personal documents, promising that they would help her apply for scholarships or internships. Aarohi complied, thinking of nothing but his guidance and the bright future she imagined. Each step brought her closer to him, and deeper into danger. The secrecy surrounding their relationship grew. Aarohi stopped telling her roommates about her days, about the new opportunities Raghav claimed to be arranging for her. She declined invitations from classmates, citing extra study sessions or part-time work. Every excuse was carefully crafted to keep Raghav's world hidden from everyone else. She was isolated, slowly, almost without realizing it, a classic trap disguised as a romantic connection. Behind closed doors, Raghav's intentions were far from romantic. Investigators would later discover that he had a long history of targeting young students, mostly women from India and other countries, using charm and financial promises to manipulate them. He had created a web of false identities, fake business ventures, and offshore accounts, all designed to trap unsuspecting victims. Aarohi, in her trust, had become another link in that dangerous chain. The illusion was flawless. Aarohi felt as if she were living a dream, a mentor who genuinely cared, guidance that promised success, and the feeling of being noticed in a world where she often felt invisible. But the truth was, Raghav's interest in her had nothing to do with care. It was control, exploitation, and greed. She was being groomed, slowly, so that her documents, her finances, and eventually her life could serve his purposes. Even as she grew more dependent on him emotionally, subtle red flags went unnoticed. He would sometimes insist she cancel plans or skip work, hinting that only he could protect her from trouble. He discouraged her from sharing details with anyone, framing secrecy as a necessary precaution for her career. Each request seemed reasonable in the moment, even thoughtful, masking the sinister intentions underneath. Aarohi's friends and classmates noticed her absence, but had no idea why she withdrew. To them, she was simply busy, ambitious, or focused on her studies. Only Raghav knew the full extent of the manipulation. He monitored her, controlled her schedule, and ensured she had no outside support. It was a dangerous combination: emotional attachment, isolation, and trust placed entirely in the hands of someone who had mastered deception. What Aarohi did not know was that Raghav was already under investigation for financial crimes. He had used previous victims to launder money, open fake bank accounts, and create fraudulent documents. Each new student who fell under his spell became both a pawn and a shield, a way to continue his schemes unnoticed. Aarohi, unaware of any of this, was walking directly into a deadly web, thinking it was love and mentorship. By the time the first real cracks began to appear, it was already too late. Aarohi's life had become intertwined with Raghav's dark world, a world she could neither see nor escape. The secret affair she had believed was harmless had grown into a dangerous game where trust, naivety, and ambition became weapons in someone else's hands. Every smile, every compliment, every promise was part of a plan she could not yet imagine. In the blink of an eye, the life Aarohi thought she was building began to slip away. What seemed like a connection of care and opportunity was slowly revealing its true face: control, exploitation, and danger. And as the days passed, the line between mentorship and manipulation blurred, leaving only one certainty: Aarohi was in deeper than she could ever have guessed, and the consequences would soon become deadly. It started with a missed class. Aarohi Mehta did not show up for her morning lecture, a rare occurrence for a student so disciplined. Her roommates initially thought she was unwell or had stayed late at the library, but as hours turned into a full day, concern began to creep in. Her phone went unanswered, her social media dormant, and small worries grew into another fear. Something was wrong, though no one could imagine the full scale of the danger lurking just beyond their sight. By the second day, whispers had started to circulate among classmates. Aarohi's absence was noticeable. She had always been diligent, reliable, and social enough to leave a mark in the small college community. Campus security was informed, and a missing person report was filed. Investigators started checking her last known locations, interviewing her roommates, and reviewing access logs from campus buildings. The trail led to one unsettling discovery: CCTV footage showing Aarohi entering an apartment complex late at night. The building belonged to Raghav Sterling. She had never been seen leaving. As detectives dug deeper, a chilling picture began to emerge. Raghav Sterling's identity was not as it seemed. Beneath the polished businessman facade lay a man with a hidden life, a series of aliases, and a long history of manipulation. He had preyed on young immigrants before, exploiting their vulnerability and trust. His past was riddled with complaints, suspicious financial dealings, and unexplained disappearances, but he had always managed to stay one step ahead of authorities. Now, Aarohi had vanished into that same dangerous orbit. The search for her grew frantic. Police traced her phone, only to discover it had been turned off and wiped clean. Attempts to contact him were met with silence. Raghav himself had disappeared, leaving no trace except a meticulously cleaned apartment that suggested premeditation. Investigators realized that Aarohi's life, which had seemed full of promise just days before, was now hanging by a thread. Her family in India was devastated. Calls from college administrators, police reports, and news alerts shattered the illusions of safety they had clung to. Aarohi had always been a careful, bright student, someone they trusted to navigate life responsibly, even thousands of miles away. The thought that she could simply vanish, her life potentially in the hands of a stranger, was unbearable. While the investigation unfolded, digital experts began combing through Raghav's devices and cloud accounts. Deleted files were recovered, revealing layers of deception. Multiple fake companies, offshore accounts, and financial trails led to the shocking conclusion: Aarohi had been unknowingly entangled in illegal activities. Raghav had used her identity for transactions, siphoning money through accounts linked to her documentation. What initially seemed like mentorship and care had been a calculated trap, and Aarohi's trust had inadvertently placed her in mortal danger. Authorities reached out to international agencies, aware that Raghav's connections extended beyond the United States. Alerts were issued, but he seemed to vanish into thin air, leaving investigators racing against time. Aarohi's classmates, friends, and roommates were left in shock, unable to comprehend how someone they had casually noticed could orchestrate such a terrifying web of control. As days passed, anxiety escalated into dread. Social media speculations, news reports, and rumors of love gone wrong fueled public fascination, but none could reveal the full horror unfolding behind the scenes. Aarohi's disappearance was no ordinary case. It was a carefully executed manipulation, a crime that had been planned long before she ever met him. Every detail, from the way he approached her at the cafe to the way he isolated her from friends, was part of a strategy designed to exploit and control. The most chilling realization came when investigators reviewed patterns in Raghav's history. His previous victims had also disappeared, their lives quietly erased from public knowledge. Aarohi had followed a dangerous trajectory from innocence to entanglement in a world she did not understand. The secret affair, the trust she placed in a man she admired, had now become a nightmare that no one could predict. Even as the search intensified, one truth became terrifyingly clear. Raghav Sterling had planned for this. Every precaution, every disappearance, and every manipulation was executed with cold precision. Aarohi Mehta was no longer just a missing student. She was a key piece in a dangerous game of power, money, and control. And while the authorities worked tirelessly, time was running out. The world watched, anxious and hopeful, but the deeper story, the hidden crime, the premeditation, the betrayal, remained hidden from view. Aarohi's life, once full of dreams, was now overshadowed by a chilling question. How could a young girl, so full of promise and ambition, vanish so completely in the land where she had come to seek freedom and opportunity? Weeks passed after Aarohi Mehta's disappearance, and the tension in the investigation had reached a fever pitch. Authorities scoured every possible lead, but each path seemed to end in a dead end. Friends and family clung to hope, refusing to believe the worst, while the shadow of fear grew heavier with each passing day. The case had already captured media attention, with news outlets running stories about the young Indian student who vanished after a secret relationship with a mysterious businessman. What the world did not yet know was that the truth was far darker than anyone could imagine. Then, in the remote outskirts of the California desert, hikers stumbled upon something that would shatter every hope. Human remains, partially concealed by sand and brush, were found in an area rarely visited by locals. Forensic teams were called in immediately, and after painstaking analysis, the grim reality was confirmed. The remains belonged to Aarohi Mehta. The cause of death pointed to foul play, a violent end that happened shortly after her disappearance. It was a revelation that shocked her family, friends, and the authorities alike. As investigators pieced together the sequence of events, the extent of Raghav Sterling's deception became terrifyingly clear. The businessman, whose charm and wealth had drawn Aarohi into his world, had been hiding a network of illegal activities. Digital forensics revealed deleted emails, spreadsheets, and financial records that linked Aarohi's personal documents to offshore accounts, shell companies, and fraudulent transactions. She had unwittingly become a tool in a sophisticated scheme to launder money and manipulate foreign students. Every piece of evidence painted a chilling picture. She had discovered something about Raghav's crimes, and he had acted swiftly to silence her. Further investigation revealed Raghav's true identity. Devraj Kincaid, a man who had changed names, locations, and personas multiple times to evade law enforcement. His past was a catalogue of manipulation, fraud, and exploitation. Authorities found similar patterns in other missing persons cases, suggesting that Aarohi was not his first victim. The realization sent shockwaves through immigrant communities across the United States. Parents and students, previously unaware of the dangers lurking beneath the surface of seemingly harmless relationships, now faced a grim warning. Digital evidence uncovered from Raghav's devices showed a calculated, methodical approach. Messages, location logs, and financial transactions demonstrated that Aarohi's disappearance was not an accident or a crime of impulse. It had been planned, executed with precision, and covered meticulously to avoid detection. Each action was premeditated, designed to ensure she could not escape and that the evidence pointing to him would be minimal. The man she had trusted completely, the person she had allowed into her life and heart, had been orchestrating her demise from the very beginning. The authorities pieced together her last known movements. She had gone to meet Raghav at his apartment, believing in promises of guidance, mentorship, and future opportunities. She had no idea that this meeting would be her last. Surveillance footage, digital footprints, and witness accounts combined to reveal a grim reality. Once Aarohi became a threat to his schemes, there was no turning back for her. The illusion of safety she had trusted had been shattered. The story sent ripples beyond the immediate circle of friends and family. Universities and student organizations began issuing warnings about predatory individuals who exploited international students, emphasizing the importance of vigilance, transparency, and support networks. News channels ran special reports highlighting the dangers of secret affairs, financial manipulation, and false mentorship. Aarohi's tragic death became more than a criminal investigation. It became a cautionary tale, a lesson about the perils of blind trust in a world where appearances can be deceiving. Even as Raghav Sterling, now known as Devraj Kincaid, remained at large. The truth about Aarohi's final days was becoming clearer. Each discovery brought a mixture of closure and horror. She had been intelligent, ambitious, and full of dreams, yet she had fallen into a trap so expertly concealed that not even those closest to her could intervene. The young student who had arrived in the United States with hope and courage had been undone by someone she believed was her protector. The reality of Aarohi Mehta's death left an indelible mark. It was not only the story of a young girl lost too soon, but also a revelation about the dangers hidden in plain sight. Her life, her dreams, and her trust had been weaponized, leaving a stark warning. Behind charm, wealth, and promises, predators can hide, and the consequences of misplaced trust can be fatal. The world was beginning to understand that this was more than a love story gone wrong. It was a meticulously planned, tragic crime that would haunt everyone who followed it for years to come. Months after Aarohi Mehta's tragic death, the hunt for Raghav Sterling, the man who had lured her into a deadly trap, reached an unexpected turning point. Authorities tracked his movements across continents, following financial trails, fake identities, and digital footprints. What had seemed like an impossible pursuit suddenly began to close in. In a small European city, far from the sunlit streets where Aarohi had first met him, law enforcement located him trying to set up another fraudulent business venture. He had assumed yet another identity, thinking the world had forgotten his past crimes. But this time, the net had tightened, and there was no escape. Raghav Sterling, or Devraj Kincaid as investigators now knew him, was extradited to the United States under high security. The charges were severe: fraud, identity theft, financial manipulation, and most notably, murder. The court case that followed revealed the horrifying depths of his deception. Evidence from his devices, bank accounts, and previous victims painted a picture of meticulous planning and cold-blooded calculation. Each detail, from the way he targeted vulnerable young women to the way he erased all traces of his crimes, was part of a methodical blueprint designed to evade detection. In the courtroom, Aarohi's story became a symbol of both tragedy and warning. Prosecutors detailed how she had been groomed over months, lured into dependency, and eventually silenced when she began to uncover his crimes. It was a chilling reminder of how charm and wealth can be weaponized to control, manipulate, and destroy lives. For Aarohi's family, the courtroom revelations were both devastating and a relief. They finally had proof that her death was not random, that it was part of a larger, calculated plan. The trial captivated the public. News outlets covered every development, emphasizing the dangers facing young international students who might be lured by promises of mentorship, love, or opportunity. Legal experts explained how predators like Raghav exploit trust and isolation, especially targeting students far from home. For the immigrant community in the United States, the case became a wake-up call. Universities and organizations began revising safety protocols, offering counseling, and spreading awareness about the subtle ways predators manipulate victims. As evidence mounted, it became clear that Raghav's crimes extended far beyond Aarohi. Investigators discovered additional victims, financial schemes, and attempts to cover tracks across multiple countries. Each revelation deepened the shock and horror of how one person could orchestrate such widespread damage while remaining undetected for so long. Aarohi, in her innocence and ambition, had been caught at the center of a meticulously designed web. The sentencing phase brought a mix of emotions. For those following the story, the conviction of Raghav Sterling provided a sense of justice, but it could never bring back Aarohi Mehta. The young student who had arrived in the United States full of dreams and hope had been robbed of her life, her future, and the opportunities she had worked so hard to achieve. Yet, through the trial, her story became a lasting message. It was a warning that trust, when placed without caution, can be manipulated by those with dark intentions. Even after the trial, the lessons of Aarohi's life and death continued to resonate. Universities launched programs to educate students about online predators, financial fraud, and emotional manipulation. Families of international students became more vigilant, and authorities collaborated globally to prevent similar tragedies. Aarohi's story, though marked by loss, inspired awareness and change that might save others from the same fate. Her parents, devastated yet determined, turned their grief into advocacy. They shared Aarohi's story publicly, hoping to prevent even one more family from experiencing a loss like theirs. They spoke about the dangers hidden behind charm and money, about the importance of vigilance, and about the necessity of supporting young immigrants who may feel isolated or vulnerable. In the end, Aarohi Mehta's life, though cut tragically short, left a mark far beyond her years. Her dreams, ambitions, and innocence had been exploited by a man whose charm masked deadly intentions. But her story also became a catalyst for change, a cautionary tale, and a reminder that the world must remain vigilant. Behind appearances of wealth, opportunity, or affection, danger can hide quietly. And for anyone who watches her story, it is a warning that trust without caution, no matter how natural or heartfelt, can have consequences that last a lifetime. Aarohi's life may have ended at 18, but her story will echo forever, a haunting reminder of the thin line between love and manipulation, hope and danger, trust and betrayal. It is a lesson that the world cannot forget.